FBI doggo wants to play. FBI/CIA agents of Reddit. What's something that you can tell us without killing us? We are all told never to use sites like this, and social media in general is pretty much a no-go. I'm telling. You'll kill us all. Not if we don't comment. What if you've already heavily used them before applying? Do you get denied? I think it would. Most people that work in the sector are definitely the private type for a reason. TBH, it's not what most people think it is. The CIA is 90% lawyers and the FBI is 90% accountants. Lolly dorks. An ex-company man once told me Get Smart was more accurate than James Bond. I saw a post the other day, can't remember if it was here or on Twitter, about how awful a spy Bond actually is. When you think about it, falls for damn near every honeypot, tells people his code name constantly. James Bond is the distraction, while others do the real sabotage/spiwick in the background. This is pretty much canon. In the first 15 minutes of every Bond movie he arrives on scene and the first thing he does is hook up with a local intelligence agent who gives him a shitload of info on what's going down. Bond's job is basically to physically deal with material, not to gather intel. So sometimes he blows shut up. Sometimes he steals files that can't be accessed via networks. Sometimes he escorts people to safety. And sometimes he caps a mother ducker. But the second scene in any Bond film after the opening Bond flirts with a girl scene is someone else handing him a stack of info about his target. If you go through the FBI interview process, it takes a while. Chances are you're going to have to spend some time working on crimes against children, which is really tough and most people don't want to do it. I used to work for a CDN, and part of my job was taking in reports of CP, verifying it and forwarding it on to our FBI contacts. I lasted 6 months, and only because my wife and child would have starved otherwise. That was over a decade ago, still has me ducked up. There are some ducked up people in this world, and they do some pretty ducked up things. My dad worked for the government, and he told me that anytime he had a meaningful interaction with someone who wasn't American, i.e. going over to my friend's house for Lunar New Year, or going on vacation to Canada, he had to report it all, and if he saw anything suspicious, went through a clearance upgrade, and got asked about a couple of people that I know through friends who I didn't include on my paperwork, and if I knew their background. Yeah, you'd like to know what accounts belong to FBI/CIA agents, wouldn't you? Yes, you are on our watchlist, buckaroo. /s of course PLS, don't assassinate me. I talked with some CIA recruiters towards the end of college and almost applied earnestly after a large group Q&A, and then a much smaller one. The thing that stuck out to me was that the guys said most CIA agents are out of shape and have limited combat training with guns or hand-to-hand. They made it clear that it's the military that uses force. If confronted, they were trained to immediately surrender or to drop their bags and run if possible. Fun fact, the I stands for intelligence, not incredibly deadly person. What about incredibly deadly experiments on the US population? I once rented out my old farmhouse to a family. They paid the rent every month, and other than not mowing the lawn to save their life, I didn't think anything bad about them. That all changed when the D called me to inform me that my renter had been murdered in Mexico and was asking my permission to search the property. Well, it turns out I had unknowingly rented my house to the Mexican mob and they were using it as safe house. It all fell apart for them when 2 of them got caught with a duffel bag full of meth. My renter had to go back to Mexico to visit his mother and was promptly murdered. Let's just say I no longer am a landlord and never will be again. I was an analyst, not an agent/officer. 85% of all classified material is classified because of how it was collected, not because it is juicy/useful. Yes, you boss and co-workers said that shut about you. Yours is the most believable comment in this thread. Yeah, that means 15% of all classified material is juicy, so hit us with the juice, CIA/FBI person. Related, I was in the sauna at my gym when this naked old man with extremely long tests started talking to me. Somehow the conversation ended up on the topic of my new roommate, who happened to be Saudi Arabian. He then proceeded to tell me he worked for the FBI and knew exactly who I was, and asked if I would like to make some money every now and then for giving him information. I said sure, not because my roommate was sketchy, but because he got drunk one day and pissed on my couch. This was 10 or so years ago, and I never really heard from him, but I think my phone was tapped for a short span of time. Met an old, retired, CIA spook at a wedding reception. Spitting image of Colonel Sanders. He was amazing. So I asked him, I don't want you to tell me anything you can't, but I'd love to know, when Kennedy got killed, what was the talk around the water cooler in the office? He didn't halt or pause to think. Hell, we all thought Johnson did it. My great uncle told us late in his life that he didn't work for JAS as an engineer his whole career. He actually worked for the CIA, and that's all he would say. Also sounds like a top tier uncle style trolling maneuver lol. If I make it to an old age and have young nieces/nephews, I'm totally telling only one of them that I work for the CIA. I just saw a post about how a man's dying wish was to troll people to thinking he was a spy. So at his funeral they hired 3 blacked out subs filled with actors to stand stoically at the funeral to confuse the hell out of people. Honestly, I'm in. That sounds dope. Operation Ivy Bells was a plan to tap Soviet communication lines. The cover story they used was that they had divers diving down to recover fragments of a new Soviet supersonic anti-ship missile. The communication line tap was a failure due to a spy. However, the dive team successfully recovered all fragments of the missiles from the Soviet weapons tests. The US was able to reverse engineer one and subsequently learned they were radar guided, only in the assumed eye guidance did not exist. Minor clarification. The tap was successful, and recordings were recovered by dive teams over many months. The tap was ultimately discovered by the Soviets because of information provided to them by Ronald Pelton, the spy you mentioned. Worked with a woman who was former NSA. We would always beg her to tell us shut, but she never did. The one thing she did say, though, was that during training they show them a video of a bunch of things they found out about and stopped. She said she hardly slept for 2 weeks after watching that. I have a relative that retired from the NSA a few years ago. She has talked about a few things in generalities, nothing specific. Among them, you will see things that entirely change your view of the world. People go in there all the time with lofty goals of changing things, and within months those goals are mostly gone. Still, if you want to change things, you work for the agency. If you just want to make money, you work for a contractor. No one cares what contractors have to say. Most people that stay long enough will do it or encounter terrorism. Many people transfer out after a few months, and the average stay is 2 years because of the visuals. Those who stick around for a long time often change for the worse, and many struggle with mental illnesses, become alcoholics, get divorced, and generally lead miserable lives with their work their only reason for continuing. Alcoholism in general is rife at the agency. When you cannot speak to anyone outside the agency about your work, it becomes nearly impossible to confide in anyone close to you. Even if you have close work friends or family, you have to be careful what you say, because not everyone is read into every program. 2 people can sit next to each other in the same office, working on the same subject for months, and never talk about it with each other, even though they are close friends outside the agency. So people turn to the bottle. Her husband worked for a different government agency and also had a top secret C clearance, but she couldn't talk about her work with him, nor could he with her, but his didn't involve the intelligence community. The agency employs psychiatrists who are cleared to be read into almost any program. Going to them, though, is often seen as a mark of shame among other agency employees, so they are not used nearly as often as they should be. She told me most of these things while trying to recruit me. She believed that I should go in knowing what to expect. I eventually declined to apply. 2 family stories, even though this will probably get buried. 1. My father's uncle told everyone for his entire life that he worked at a button factory. It was only revealed after his death that he, in fact, worked at a missile factory and assembled the gyroscopes for the guidance in missiles. 2. We always knew my grandfather worked for the government at the Pentagon. We never knew exactly what he did, but every 6 months or so he would call up to talk to my mom. The conversation was pretty much always the same. My mom and grandfather would catch up for a few, then the year would turn into, so I have another clearance upgrade coming up. You will probably get a call like always. Just wanted to give you a heads up. Surer than shut. A week later some government agency would call up. It was always a different one and ask for my mom. They would ask a bunch of questions and that would be that. When he died from Alzheimer's, at his funeral, 4 men in black suits attended and no one knew who they were. After the burial, they approached his widow and handed her a plaque with 17 government agency symbols on it. Turns out he was responsible for interagency cooperation and training. He basically got everyone to talk to and teach each other. Now his son works for them. Doing what? We don't know and don't ask.